Good evening, and welcome to another episode of What's It Really Worth? I'm Raz.
And I'm Rich, and this is our February, early March episode because weather kind of messed with us again this month, making it a little difficult to get some filming in.
New Jersey! Tonight we're going to be discussing with you a real gem, Apocalypse Chaos by Zeman Games, and we're also going to be, Rich is going to be giving you some insight into Xanther's guide.
Yes.
Which is exciting.
But let's jump into Apocalypse Chaos because we played this multiple times to make sure that what we're reviewing is correct.
Right. For you,
so you know.
We did this for you.
That's right.
And you.
And multiple times this was done.
Yeah, played a few times.
Yes.
Because the first time it went so
poorly
that we weren't sure we were doing it right.
Let's reread the rules and do this again.
And we were doing it
correctly.
So,
but we'll get into that as we go to each part.
Yeah, so do you want to discuss some of the components first?
Yeah. All right, so we're going to do MSRP value first. We're going to talk about the components. And I'm going to grab a few things here. And maybe one of the cards. And the component quality, actually pretty good. The dice are only screen printed, I think. No, they actually might be engraved as well. So really decent quality on the dice.
Yep.
Cards, okay. I mean, generic kind of artwork, nothing fancy or exciting, but it works. Your tokens and your character figures here, decent heavy card stock. These will take a lot of wear, but they'll probably never be a lot of wear.
Are we giving it away too soon, Rich?
No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think so.
All right, so MSRP value, the group came in with a 2.5.
Right.
I think that's really pretty good.
Yeah, $49.99 regular retail. It can be picked up, which kind of was an indication to us up front that there may be a slight issue with the game. It can be picked up a little bit cheaper on some of your wholesalers.
Yes.
I
think a lot of people are sitting on copies of it.
Yep, but $49.99 is what Z-Man felt this game was worth.
Correct.
So, okay. And setup playtime was 3. Yeah, it can play fairly quickly because you just don't last. There's a lot of mechanical things that are going on in the game that just bring your doom about very, very quickly. So
we'll get into that in replayability.
Yeah, we'll get. But the setup time for 3, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take long to set up. Some of the character cards, as a matter of fact, all of them are very icon driven.
Yes.
So that takes a little bit of time to get used to, but that's part of the learning curve.
Yeah. And each of the characters has a unique stat line.
Right.
That one takes a little bit of getting used to because you got to figure out what their stat line specifically means.
Yeah.
Whereas, movement, shooting, close combat, all of those are fairly generic. But that last one, you really have to know what your character is. You can't just tell from what everybody else has.
Yeah. So that brings us to learning curve.
Learning curve. We gave it. The group gave it a 2.5.
Right.
Now, the rules required some going through, and I don't think everything was perfectly clear.
No.
And I think that's why learning curve is lower. I think it's a fair score, but there are still certain rules within the game where you're really not quite sure what the intent was. We made our best guess. For example, line of sight.
That's a good point. Like line of sight, people at home are probably saying, well, line of sight is exactly what you can see. But is it? Because there's the game, as you can tell by the board on the table, has height dimensions. It's actually 3-dimensional. And sometimes there's different maps in the game, in the rule book. You'll actually be stacking pieces like 3 high. So if the character is down on the bottom floor, how high can they see? What is their true line of sight? Not really kind of discussed.
Right, yeah. They talk about range in that you can't shoot into the same room you're in, but you can shoot into an adjacent room.
Right.
But what they don't say is if we'll put our character into this room and we'll say we'll just use a die for now, our creature's here, we have line of sight to him through the door. But do we have line of sight to him here?
Right.
He is still technically in this room. The rules aren't clear on it.
Yep.
We kind of intuited, whatever it is, that
and I never intuited
unless it's a direct line, it's not line of sight.
Trying to keep it simple because the monsters are not simple.
No, they are not.
As a matter of fact, part of the learning curve of 2.5 is understanding there are 3 phases to initiative.
Correct.
3, 2, 1. Some players can modify which one they go on, but the monsters themselves are going on a specific one, and then they do Gadzuki funky things.
Yes.
Sometimes they will punch into a area they are adjacent to. They will jump across the board, shoot back, move 2 to the left, 1 to the right. Have a Cosmo.
Do the hokey pokey, turn themselves about.
And each card, it's not just by monster type. They're pretty unique as how they move, which creates a lot of calamity, which I think the designer wanted.
Correct.
But it doesn't. That's the whole chaos part.
Yeah. And the thing is I love the concept of it.
Yeah.
But as we get further in and talk about it a little bit more, you're going to see why it becomes an issue.
Which is where we're on now, which is replayability.
Yeah. Replayability came up with a 1. And really, we played this multiple times because we felt like we had to be doing something wrong.
Really wrong.
It was never even close to us being able to win.
No.
Now, 1 and 2 player, I tried to run some numbers. I am pretty sure mathematically, 1 and 2 players impossible to win. The creatures have their health, and you have only 2 creatures in this deck of cards that can be killed with a single attack if you're lucky.
Correct.
Which means every other thing in there requires at least 2 attacks.
Yep.
Which means if you have 1 player or 2 players, you've got to make sure all your attacks are going to one thing. But as you're doing that one thing, everything else is starting to fill up on you.
Yep. It's pile on. It's literally dog pile on the rabbit.
And again, I love the idea of it, but I think there's just some balance issues, and replayability came in as a 1 because after playing it once or twice, you do not want to play it again. You're just frustrated and you want to throw it out.
Yeah, this isn't Pandemic frustrated where you said, "Oh, so close." This is tip the table frustrated. I don't ever want to see it again.
Exactly.
And that's why it's really a 1. Going into the replayability part with the cards again. Speaking of monster movement, it becomes instead of the chaos that the designer we believe wanted you to feel, it becomes a game of almost an engineer's game where on this phase, this and this will happen. I must be here to avoid the damage, but then step back in to make sure my shot goes off. You are literally programming in your head an entire series of events.
Right.
And it's just because it's so hard to keep track of everything and do it right. It's not really chaos anymore. It slows the game so far down.
Right.
Yeah. So it's a tough game. It's a tough game to enjoy. The artwork is decent. The concept of tower building, I like it. The storyline is even kind of funny. You know, everyone's just piling on this ship, not letting you leave.
Right.
It just doesn't come out.
Yeah. And like I said at the beginning, the components and stuff, they are good. Everything's really it's a decent quality.
Yep.
The fact that the game you don't want to play it again
just hurts.
Just really it's painful.
Yeah. So that gets us to genre. Now, genre is a category that a lot of people have gone back and forth with. Is it just about the style of game? Is it about whether it's cooperative or competitive? There's a lot of things that go into genre, but our raters gave it only a 2.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that is colored by their experience with the game.
Yeah.
You know, I see this as aliens. You know, you're colonial marines and you're being overrun by aliens. And I think that would appeal to everybody, and I think that's kind of what the designers hoped would happen is,
right.
You know, people would get that feeling of it without actually tagging it aliens.
Yep.
And be able to look at it that way. It is co-op, which means it's, you know, you against the game. Everybody gets to play together, so, you know, you're not fighting with one another. But, yeah, it's tough. It doesn't really fit any specific thing. So I think, you know, the Raiders just didn't care for it enough to rate it higher.
Yeah, and the other thing with cooperative games, and I'm sure you at home have felt this way because I know Rich and I have kind of seen this too. In a cooperative game situation like a Pandemic or a Fury of Dracula or Letters of Whitechapel, if you have one player who's really onto something, the group may begin to become almost relaxed to them, and they'll start guiding their moves.
Yeah.
Well, you go here, and I'll go here, and all of a sudden you have one boss sort of running a game.
Yeah.
This happens quickly here because most of the players are either confused or they're trying to keep track of a monster or their health. And if you have that one guy who's really good at linear plotting out the events in the right order, he's going to take over this, and you're just going to feel like you're along for the ride.
Yeah.
Which I think is also part of the reason they didn't like it that much.
Yeah, and I think, with this game, you have to be willing to either sacrifice yourself or other players
Which I'm normally okay with.
because you can't win.
no one's intact.
And we tried, all right, I'll die this turn so you can continue on.
Right.
But it just doesn't last.
No.
And if you have one person who's kind of running it, they're going to determine who's dying.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that's going to kill it.
Yeah. So, overall, out of possible 25 points if we gave zeros in categories, really the lowest score should be 5, but out of 25 points, it came in at a flat 11.
Yeah, and I think that's about right. I wanted to like this game.
So did I.
And I was more than willing to give it a shot. And when it didn't go well the first time, I'm like, no, let's do it again.
Yep.
Because I want to make sure that this is really how I feel.
Yeah.
But repeated plays, it still came out the same way every time.
Yeah, I'm usually trusting in Z-Man Games. It's a name that if I see on a box, I'm usually fairly confident. And the company part didn't let us down.
Right.
Like we said, bits pretty good. Yeah, it's just the design is hard.
Yeah.
So, okay, that's Apocalypse Chaos. So, Rich, we want to talk about something else on the D&D front. So we're going to, you don't see us doing. I'll step out of the show.
We're gonna talk about Xanther's Guide to Everything. This was the biggest selling role playing book ever. Last few years.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly.
Supplement. Yep.
Yeah. And I could see why. After Wizards released a lot of stuff for the DMs. You had the DM's Guide, the Monster Manuals, all the scenario books. The only other player's guide besides Player's Handbook had been the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide,
Which was limited.
for players.
Yeah.
Xanther's Guide to Everything gives every character type something new to look at, something new to try. But DMs aren't left out either. There's some new stuff, more on the storytelling side of things than on rules or new monsters. But just a lot of great stuff to really build out a campaign if you're playing over a long period of time.
D&D is finally starting to see what Paizo had seen, that you got to keep not only the DM interested and let him have his storytelling stuff, his subtables and all the other things that he needs to create mass adventures. You have to let the players have other choices.
Right.
And this book allows rangers to go into different directions and monks to have, new monasteries and new traditions to follow, and paladins to have, besides an oathbreaker, there's you have options. And I think that's really where D&D has always had its one fallback is you pigeonhole yourself into it. Yeah, you were always pigeonholed as a D&D class into this.
Yeah.
Where with Pathfinder, it was I can take this skill and this skill and this skill and make a rounded type of character.
Yeah.
This is allowing that to start happening more.
Well, I mean, 5th edition already had that. Your skill types by taking your backgrounds and stuff like
and
that.
And feats make it a little different.
Right. Yeah. This just gives you more options in your character classes.
Yep.
I know, having been a DM for a long time, that keeping the players interested is not always easy. There are definitely times where the story is kind of slow. If you don't have a great DM, and 5th edition kind of limits magic and new stuff coming in, having new options for your character class, I think that really helps.
So, Rich, what you're saying is not everyone gives you 25-page backgrounds on their characters?
No.
Yeah.
So, Xanther's Guide, I think if you're a player, buy it.
Yeah, it's a must-have.
Yeah. Now, like all the books they've been doing recently, except for the scenario books, both a retail version and a limited version cover.
Yeah.
I usually end up getting a limited version cover. This is the retail version cover. They're both beautiful.
Yeah, they really
are. You don't go wrong. From a player standpoint, you don't go wrong getting it.
Yep. So, what would you say out of scale 1 to 5? 5?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Xanther's Guide is absolutely so much fun to go through.
Yeah. So that's pretty much where we're at. Apocalypse Chaos, something probably to stay away from unless you're really...
unless you're determined to try and win.
Or that you happen to be a masochist. And you don't mind throwing money away because you're independently wealthy. I'm okay with you buying this game. As a matter of fact, if you want a copy, you can reach me at, or Rich, behind the hot water pipes.
Yeah.
At the Dragon
Just go to the Facebook page.
Yeah.
Say, Raz, I want your copy of Apocalypse Chaos.
And we will get it to you somehow. Very... Yeah. So that's pretty much it. Although we did want to talk about people in the Jersey area. Cons coming up, right?
Yep, we've got Cold Wars coming up in Lancaster, PA.
Right.
I will actually be there.
I should be there.
Demoing some of my stuff. So
Something that's coming out on a Kickstarter campaign.
Kickstarter, yes. By the time this video hits, the Kickstarter will probably already be running.
So the Kickstarter is for?
It is for a miniatures game called Not All Blood Runs Red. It is a fantasy World War I setting.
Would you call it punked?
Punked?
Yeah, punked is that kind of mashup of different genres that it doesn't. It follows historical things, like there's a lot of history in it, but it's also mashed up with magic.
Correct.
So yeah, like a punk idea.
Okay.
Call
So
it
yeah,
punked.
Punked.
Cool. World War Punk. Yeah, check it out though on Kickstarter. It's by Rat Trap Productions.
Yes.
And it's hopefully going to be live on Tuesday. Well, but this date would be the
26th of February.
26th of February. So if you're a fan of the show, or if you just want to support Rich, and which I think is a great idea, check out the Kickstarter.
Yeah, because if you support me, then I can spend more money on the show.
And we can buy more lights.
Exactly.
I'm getting it clear. Yeah. So anyway. All right. So thank you for joining us. We'll be back next month with Gloomhaven.
Yes.
And a little bit of conversation about Rising Sun, which also came out, but I know Gloomhaven is super hot right now.
Yes. Yeah. And I'll let you carry the boxing.
Yeah, 24 pounds.
Yeah.
Massive. Okay.
Okay.
So